My name is Aarav Mehra. I'm 37 now. I've built a quiet life, far away from the noise, but some echoes from the past never stop ringing. Some calls are just missed. Others haunt you for years. When I first got my own phone, it felt like freedom. It was the summer of 2004. I just finished high school, still riding high on a wave of district-level academic awards, and looking forward to college. My parents, hardworking, middle-class folks, had saved up to buy me a phone. It wasn't flashy. A second-hand Nokia, gray and clunky, with a rubber keypad that clicked louder than necessary and a battery cover that refused to sit flush. But it was mine. And for a teenager in a rapidly digitizing world, that meant something. I told myself then, someday I'll buy a phone with my own money. A new one. The kind you see in ads. The kind that belongs to someone who made it. That dream stuck with me. Maybe it was silly, maybe even petty, but for someone who had to wear hand-me-downs and fix his own bicycle with wire and duct tape, the idea of owning something new, something earned, it mattered. The reward of persistence. By the time I started college, I was commuting almost 2 hours a day. It wasn't glamorous. Cramped buses, noisy engines, and a heavy backpack became my daily companions. But I didn't mind it. I was focused. Determined. And then came the awards. One from a nationalized bank came with actual prize money. Not much, but enough to combine with my savings. That was the moment. I walked into a small mobile store in town and walked out with a brand new Sony Ericsson K300i. Silver body, bright screen, a little joystick in the center. It was beautiful. To me, it looked like something out of a sci-fi film. I even upgraded to a premium SIM card. Paid a bit extra for it too. It had a clean number, easy to remember. Back then, that mattered. It was supposed to be the start of something. But then the phone started ringing. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A man with a thick, impatient voice asked for someone named Bitsa. I told him he had the wrong number and hung up. An hour later, another call. Then another. Hello, I'm calling from the collections department. Sir, this is regarding your outstanding loan. We're trying to reach Mr. Bitsa. Every time, it was a different institution. A different voice. But the name was always the same. It didn't take long to realize what had happened. The number I proudly paid extra for had previously belonged to someone else. Someone named Bitsa. At first, it was 2 to 3 calls a day. Then 4 to 5. I'd pick up, say, wrong number. Hang up. But they kept coming. My premium number became a curse. And I didn't want to let it go. I had paid for this number. It was neat, symmetrical, memorable, mine. So I adapted. I started blocking the numbers. But here's the thing. Back then, blocking numbers wasn't like it is today. You had to do it through the phone's software, and every time you changed devices, which, for a student like me, happened every couple of years, you lost all your blocked numbers. So I kept a list. Yes, a literal list. On paper. Name of caller. Phone number. Date. I still have that notebook. Page after page of spam numbers that were actually real people, desperately trying to reach a man named Bitsa. It became routine. Wake up. Go to college. Block 3 numbers. Rinse, repeat. Years passed. I graduated. Got my first job in 2009 at a mid-sized tech company. It was a junior role, mostly back-end development and minor testing. But it paid, and it felt like I was finally stepping into adult life. I still had the same number, and I was still getting those calls. By now, I trained myself to just ignore unknown numbers. My voicemail had a generic message. I avoided long conversations with strangers. It had made me distant, wary. A few close friends knew the story and teased me about it, calling my phone the haunted line. I laughed along, but it wasn't funny anymore. Every ring reminded me of someone else's mess. Someone I'd never met. someone who had left behind a digital trail of destruction. Around 2010, I was shifted to a new project. The announcement email was short and celebratory, with buzzwords like cross-functional collaboration and leadership opportunities. What it didn't say was that this project had a reputation. A dark one. People whispered about it. How team members burned out within months. How deliverables changed without notice. How the project manager was different. His name? Bits. Just Bits. I didn't make the connection. Not yet. Bits the brute. Bits was a force of nature, and not in a good way. He was the kind of manager who demanded reports before 8 a.m. and then wouldn't read them until midnight. He thrived on confusion. Chaos was his comfort zone. Emails with vague deadlines. Meetings scheduled during lunch. Urgent tasks that turned out to be vanity projects. And worst of all, he was always watching. Even a missed comma on a slide could earn you a public lashing during review meetings. He prided himself on breaking people down. "I need warriors," he once said during a team call. "Not whiners." People started quitting. Some got transferred. Some just vanished, resigned silently and left the country. The rest of us? We learned to cope. We worked weekends, canceled plans, smiled through the exhaustion. But I couldn't shake the feeling. There was something familiar about him. One late night, after surviving yet another 12-hour workday, I was sitting at my desk, sipping stale coffee, phone in hand. A call came in. Unknown number. Reflexively, I declined it. But the name. When I found out that the man who had tormented me for years through phone calls, the faceless, unreachable Bitsa, was the same man who now stood over me at work with coffee breath and deadlines, I didn't immediately act. I felt stunned. Numb. It was like watching two nightmares blur into one waking reality. My tormentor had a face now. A name. A position. Power. And I still had no idea just how far his damage stretched. A day in his hell. Imagine this. It's 8:02 a.m. on a Tuesday. You arrive at your desk 2 minutes late. Your inbox has 9 emails from Bits already. The earliest one was sent at 4:37 a.m. The subject lines are always in all caps. Urgent, need module update. Why is the server still down? Reply immediately. Click into them and you'll find vague, rambling paragraphs with barely any punctuation. Instructions buried under sarcasm and passive aggression. None of it makes real sense, but you're expected to decode it anyway. If you ask for clarification, you're labeled slow. If you miss a deadline based on unclear instructions, you're incompetent. There is no winning with Bits. He watches everything. Tracks keyboard activity. Measures productivity in hours logged, not results delivered. He's the kind of manager who insists you CC him on every single email, even if it's just to confirm what color pen someone should use in a meeting. And meetings? That's a whole separate nightmare. Meetings as weapons. Bits weaponized meetings the way a bully wields silence in a school hallway. He scheduled them over lunch breaks, after hours, during weekends, during vacations. And they weren't productive. They were performances. He'd start with a question no one had context for. So, why didn't the integration test pass for the third submodule of the archive parser? No one would answer because no one understood the question. He'd wait exactly 3 seconds. Then unleash. Pathetic. I'm surrounded by mediocrity. Why do I even bother with updates when none of you read them? If you tried to defend yourself, he cut you off. If you stayed silent, he called you invisible. We used to call it the gauntlet. And once a week, each of us walked through it. He didn't just manage the project. He managed our exhaustion. By month 3, I had developed insomnia. By month 4, my appetite vanished. My mother noticed when I came home for a festival and barely touched my plate. You're getting thinner, she said. Are you okay? I lied. Smiled. Said I was just tired. How could I explain that my life was being drained by a man who walked with perfect posture, wore crisp shirts, and shattered morale with a single click? Every time he messaged, I felt a small sting in my chest. It was like death by 1,000 Slack notifications. And then there were his tirades. Bits didn't believe in private corrections. He believed in public humiliation. Once, when a teammate accidentally pushed a test build into the production environment, he didn't just reprimand them. He created a PowerPoint about the mistake. With screenshots, graphs, a lessons learned slide. He presented it to the entire team during a Friday town hall. The developer, let's call him Arun, left the company the following Monday. Bits called it a necessary purge. I called it psychological warfare. We never used his full name. He was just Bits, almost like Voldemort. And he seemed to enjoy that reputation. There was a gleam in his eye every time someone flinched when he walked by. But now that I knew his full name, Bitsa, things started making sense. Suddenly, the cruel patterns, the megalomania, the arrogance, they weren't quirks. They were his default setting. The man who once gave out my number to dozens of financial institutions to dodge responsibility was now giving out tasks and deadlines with the same impunity. He hadn't changed. He'd just grown bigger teeth. Every time he barked at someone during meetings, I heard the automated debt collection calls in my head. We're trying to reach Mr. Bitsa. I'd hear it in stereo. The old voices from the past overlapping with the very real one standing in front of me. The voice that had stolen my peace. The voice that now stole my weekends. I'd go to sleep hearing Bit's emails and wake up hearing a debt collector's script. The two voices were becoming indistinguishable. And every day, that merging made me angrier. People talked. Not openly. No one dared. But in whispers, behind locked pantry doors and while refilling water bottles, the truth began to surface. Someone had noticed a guy hanging around the office building lobby asking for Mr. Bitsa. Another person got a weird voicemail, someone asking for repayment. And then one night, when I stayed late, I overheard something that changed everything. Bits was on the phone in his cabin. He was shouting, but not his usual office bully shout. It was fear. Don't call me on this number. I told you I don't have the money right now. Pause. I said I'm working on it. Stop harassing me. Another pause. Fine. I'll get a new number again. Just stop calling this one. Again. It clicked. This man had been changing numbers, ducking debt collectors, and throwing away phones like used tissues. And yet my number had followed him like a curse. A shadow. A debt he never expected to catch up. Until now. Around this time, our company merged with a parent firm. Nothing major changed, except we were now using Microsoft Outlook. With that came an internal directory, a view of the org chart. It was supposed to foster transparency. And that's when I saw it. His full name. Bits. A.H. There it was. Staring at me. Cold and undeniable. Bitsa. No typos. No doubts. The monster on my phone and the tyrant in my office were one and the same. I went home that night and stared at my phone. The number I'd fought to keep. The number that had haunted me for nearly a decade. I went back to the old notebook, the one with the debt collector calls. Some pages were smudged. Some torn. But the numbers were there. And behind those numbers were stories. People who were owed money. People who were ignored. People who had every reason to want to find Bitsa. And he had every reason to hide. But not anymore. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. He had made my life hell, for years. He made others suffer, both professionally and financially. And yet he strutted around like a king. He thought he was untouchable. But he'd forgotten something. He'd forgotten the number. The one link he couldn't erase. Me. And so, I made a plan. Quiet. Simple. Devastating. It started with unblocking numbers. 150 of them. I removed every restriction on my phone, even the most persistent collectors. I picked up when they called. But this time, I didn't say, "Wrong number." I said, "It was a Tuesday morning." Bits usually strutted into the office like a general on a battlefield, shirt perfectly tucked, tie tighter than his deadlines. But that day, he looked rattled. He walked past our row of cubicles without making eye contact, one hand gripping his phone like it had betrayed him. It had. And I had helped make that happen. The calls increased, slowly at first. A colleague told me they'd heard Bits cursing in the restroom. Another said his name had come up in an angry voice outside the building, someone asking reception where he was. At first, people thought it was just typical office gossip. But I knew better. This wasn't gossip. This was the past crashing through the doors he thought were locked forever. And I was the doorman. I went through the old notebook again. Page after page of scribbled numbers, caller names, and small details. Bank of Midtown, RB Collections, harassed daily. At the time, I had just been trying to stay sane. Keep track. Make sure I wasn't going crazy. But now, it was evidence. Every call I had logged was a thread. And I had just started pulling. I called my old mentor again, the retired teacher who'd once taught both me and, years earlier, the man who would become my tormentor. "I need to know more about him," I said. The line went quiet for a moment. Then came a sigh. "I always knew that boy would come back to haunt someone." And he told me everything. Bitsa was brilliant. Charming. Top of his class. Good at speeches. Popular with teachers. But behind the scenes, he had always been manipulative. Even in high school, he borrowed money from classmates and never paid them back. He once created a fake donation campaign in the name of flood relief, collected money from half the neighborhood. No one ever saw where it went. When suspicions rose, he moved away for college. By then, he had burned so many bridges that his name became a whisper in the community. And now, he had returned, wearing a suit, holding a title, pretending to be someone new. But underneath, he was still the same debt-dodging coward who used lies like currency. One evening, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it ring. Then curiosity got the better of me. I hesitated. This wasn't part of the plan. I wasn't supposed to engage. Just redirect. But something in his voice told me I needed to hear more. The man introduced himself as Rajesh, an independent investigator hired by a third-party collections agency. He had been following the trail of a Mr. Bitsa, who had taken out multiple loans in 2008 to 2011 and disappeared without a trace. "We didn't even know if he was still in the country," Rajesh said. "For the first time in over a decade, my phone stopped ringing with ghosts. No more. Is this Mr. Bitsa? No more. This is your final warning. No more. Please verify your loan application. Just peace." Digital silence. But the world around Bits was getting louder. Bits didn't leave with a bang. He vanished like a stain that had finally been scrubbed clean. One day, his name was on the morning status call. The next, it was gone. No warning. No explanation. His cabin was suddenly cleared, files, water bottle, personal items, emptied overnight. Whispers filled the office. "He's on medical leave." "No, suspended." HR found forged documents. Someone even joked. "Maybe he gave his own manager's number to debt collectors." I nearly choked on my coffee. They had no idea how close to the truth they were. Days after he disappeared, I received an email from HR. Nothing alarming, just a polite request to meet. I walked in calm but curious. A manager and an HR executive were seated across the desk. Both looked serious, but not hostile. "We're conducting an internal review on Mr. John," the HR executive said, her tone cautious. "We noticed some calls were redirected from your phone to his contacts. Would you be willing to help us understand the context?" I nodded slowly. I used to get calls for him. A lot of them. For years. Apparently, he had my number before me. They asked if I had ever passed along his number. I paused. I did, I said plainly. After a decade of being harassed because of him, I figured the people looking for him deserved to know where he really was. There was silence. Then the manager leaned back and said, "Thank you. That'll be all." I don't know what they expected. An apology? A lie? They got neither. From colleagues I trusted, I learned the full aftermath. Apparently, once I redirected enough collectors to his employer, the chaos began snowballing. Here's what I found out over the next few weeks. 10 different collectors reached out to our company's landline in the span of 5 days. At least 3 legal notices were issued to corporate headquarters citing Bitz's name and fake references to employees and senior leadership. One of the VPs received a letter that said he had co-signed a vehicle loan for someone he'd never met. Bitz's boss, furious and embarrassed, demanded a full investigation. The legal department uncovered documents Bitz had submitted during hiring, one of which had discrepancies in previous employment history and references. HR found out he had never updated his contact number with the company, even though he was supposed to. Each thread led to another. Each lie unraveled a new one. He had built a career on sand. And the tide had finally come in. I later heard that he was formally terminated after a disciplinary hearing. Not just for the financial chaos, but for creating a hostile work environment, too. The final nail was a recording submitted anonymously. His rant during a late-night call where he screamed at an employee for costing him credibility. That employee? Was me. Apparently, someone had hit record and sent it directly to HR after he was suspended. I don't know who. Maybe karma wears many masks. The office changed after he left. The air felt lighter. People started taking lunch breaks again, real ones. Laughter returned to the pantry. New project leads were more collaborative. There were fewer urgent 11 p.m. meetings. Deadlines made sense again. And my phone? Still silent. It was like exhaling after holding your breath for years. I visited my old mentor again. He poured tea for both of us, looked me in the eye, and said, "You know, sometimes justice doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be just enough." He continued, "Did you ever imagine, back when you bought that number, that it would change your life this much?" "No," I said. "But maybe it was supposed to." I never confronted Bitz. Never sent him a message. Never gloated. I didn't need to. Because real revenge? It doesn't always look like payback. Sometimes, it looks like truth finding its way home. Looking back, it's poetic. He gave my number to everyone, so he could disappear. I gave his number to everyone, so he could be found. He thought I was just some random guy who inherited a burden. But I became the one thread he couldn't cut. He burned bridges and buried skeletons. I simply held up a flashlight. About 3 months later, I received a message from a number I didn't recognize. No greeting. No signature. Just, "You think you won, but you don't know what you've started." I stared at it for a long time. Then deleted it. I had nothing more to say. Because the story was over. His power? Gone. His mask? Torn. His empire? Ashes. And me? Free. Sometimes revenge isn't about breaking someone. It's about stopping them from breaking anyone else. And in the silence that follows, you realize you were never the villain. You were the ending they ran from. I got a phone number in college that used to belong to someone named Bitza. Debt collectors harassed me for years looking for him. A decade later, I found out my toxic boss, Bitz, was actually that Bitza. I redirected the calls and gave collectors his and his manager's real numbers. He was exposed, fired, and ruined. I never looked back.